In 2012, Capcom would release a game which would cement this beloved IP into the halls of horror misfortune, alongside Halloween Resurrection, Friday the 13th Number Whatever, and Nightmare on Elm Street. That's right, Resident Evil 6 was released. Though it wasn't a flop by any means, Resident Evil 6 acted as more of an arcade shoot-'em-up. RE5 was the same thing. And though the games were fun to play with friends, it took a clear step back from what made Resident Evil unique in the first place. That's why I relate it to Halloween and Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. Simply because the studio was releasing popcorn games, and it lost its magic, and Resident Evil had a problem. It wasn't scary anymore. But 5 years later, Capcom shocked everyone. Not with a fixed camera or an arcade-style shoot-'em-up. No, they gave us Ethan's story. Because this wasn't going to be a game like the last few Resident Evil games. Instead, it would shy away from the ridiculous, over-the-top gunfights and boulder punching, and bring the player into a cabin nestled deep in the south of Louisiana. This allowed the player to be completely immersed in a claustrophobic environment with well-crafted atmosphere and sound design. The team looked at the original Resident Evil game and borrowed some things that they know worked the first time. There was a greater emphasis on resource management, letting the player sweat it out a bit if they couldn't carry an extra health with them. Looking at the setting, I think the Baker's plantation acts as an homage to the Spencer Mansion. Twists and turns, secret passages, and a heavy reliance on environment to set the mood. Hell, both Resident Evil and Resident Evil 7 take place in the middle of the woods, just different types of woods. And once the player makes the decision to move forward and hop down the ledge, there's no one that can help you, and there is no turning back. There's also something fun about the Baker family hunting you while you're trying to survive. It's very Tyrant or Licker vibes, and you can see how this differed from Resident Evil 5 and 6. The tone is scarier, the perspective puts you in the front seat, and the focus is on survival versus combat. There were more major differences even when it came down to the visual and audio experience. For example, Resident Evil 5 and 6 at the time were relying on loud bangs, flashy visuals, and Hollywood action-like sequences or cutscenes. But when we look at 7, we see photorealistic graphics, ambient sound design, and a lighting that made it as though you were just barely there. You couldn't see into the darkness ahead. And this truly strengthened this game's deserved placement in the survival horror category. They even put it in VR to give you the direct in-your-face experience. So what's the story? Well, the following contains spoilers, so skip ahead to the time listed below, or stick around for a refresher. It's not super long. But before we get into that, I'm M. Fuji. I publish commentaries on all sorts of things, video games, travel, so if that's your type of thing, subscribe to hang out. Loving husband Ethan Winters sets off to find his wife Mia, who disappeared 3 years earlier while working a babysitting gig. Ethan, with no leads, receives a mysterious video from Mia, leading him to the deep south in Louisiana, a plantation owned by the Baker family.
I don't know.
When he gets there, he finds haunting cult-like effigies, a camera van, and a purse with Mia's driver's license inside. Ethan enters this dilapidated and seemingly abandoned house where he finds Mia alive, but something's wrong. Mia, with black veins in her skin, starts attacking Ethan with what seems to be an inhuman strength and rage, but Ethan kills Mia, only for her to mysteriously revive herself. As Ethan attempts to escape this living hell, she returns once more with a chainsaw to cut Ethan's hand off. The two fight, and once Ethan is able to defeat Mia, he's blindsided by the patriarch of the house, Jack Baker, who drags him deeper into this nightmare. Now Ethan finds himself a prisoner at the Baker's family dinner, and though the gesture does seem nice, the food is something to be avoided at all costs. We get some hints that this family isn't what they seem. Jack cuts his son Lucas's arm off, which he yells, "Not again!" And Ethan's hand, which was cut off by Mia, is stapled back onto his wrist. The Bakers are deformed by some bioorganic weapon known as the mold, and in Ethan's desperate attempt to escape, he is pitted up against each of the Bakers. First Jack's human form, then Marguerite's insect form, then Lucas's twisted saw-like games, all while unraveling their tragic backstory. Through recordings and documents, Ethan learns that a bioweapon got loose near the farm. It attached itself to the Baker family and, unfortunately, infected them, forcing them, through a hive-like mind control, to do their bidding. This bioweapon was a little girl named Evelyn. As Ethan progresses, this isn't the only mystery he unravels. In fact, he learns something about his beloved wife. Though she was in fact hired for a babysitting gig, Mia worked for the secretive company that was transporting Evelyn, the bioweapon. Mia was hired to watch over Evelyn while transporting her, but somehow Evelyn infected the transport ship and it crashed just by the Baker's plantation. Having learned this, Ethan then confronts Evelyn, who reveals herself to be none other than the old deteriorating woman at the dinner table from the beginning. She transforms into a massive mold creature and is about to kill Ethan, but a weapon falls from the sky, and Ethan kills Evelyn and the mold dissolves. Ethan is then rescued by a familiar face in the Resident Evil franchise, Chris Redfield. They escape, leaving the Baker's family farm behind. But who created Evelyn? Who is this company? And what happens to Ethan and Mia going forward? After such action-heavy and blockbuster-style games, longtime fans yearned for a return to a game that scared them like when they were younger. And Resident Evil 7 delivered that experience in a way that respected the players while allowing Capcom to have fun by bringing unique scares and something new to fear. Hillbillies, because that's never been done before. Resident Evil 7 allowed fans of the previous games and newer players to join without having to experience much outside of this game. You could turn this game on and go. You didn't need to know Umbrella or the incident in Raccoon City. Instead, you got an encapsulated game with enough Easter eggs and nods to the originals to keep returning players interested, and a locked-in everyman story for the new player, allowing them, if interested, to return to the older games to find out who this Chris Redfield is. Which is perfect for players, because while they're waiting for Resident Evil 8 to come out, they can go and try all of the previous games. Of course, with this being 2025, Resident Evil 8 has come out already and was a fantastic continuation to the Winter story. And if you want to see a retro on that, I've linked it up above and down in the comments. Now, I'm M. Fuji, and this has been a quick retrospective on Resident Evil 7. Stay tuned, stay subscribed, and I'll catch you next week.
Hey, subscribe. Hey, subscribe. Please.